wings and horsehair mattress, which were soft, you know, and you really had a nice soft bed.
Yeah.
So, and then besides that, I wanted to make good and sure I was up at 4. So I was quite awake, ready, waiting for him, and when he rapped on the window, I was there in no time. And I went with him, and he says, "Have you ever used a sigh?" I said, "No." I says, "I'm willing to learn." So those sighs, they're not the short-handled ones like you have here. Here, the a long one,
Long
you know.
ones, mhm.
Yeah. But the handles are straight. Here they're crooked. Over there they're straight, and one handle goes this way, and the other one goes that way, and then you saw it go like that. And so I was bending over, going down the hill, going like that. And he says, "Well, you're going to have such a sore back." He said, "You better stand up straight and do your moving that way." And I learned how to sharpen and the sigh and all that. So we cut all the grass. They had 23 or 28, I don't remember, milking cows.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always a woman that done the milking.
Mm.
And they milked them 3 times a day.
3 times a day.
3 times a day. So that morning, by 6 o'clock, we had to be back with the moment when you do that. They had lots of people there.
Tell me about that. They had like a little ceremony or something?
Yes, they had the scouts there, and you get a flag, and they have a salute. And
What did that mean to you? How'd you feel?
it means, it makes you feel very humble inside, you know, and you feel like you're just a tiny little mouse in a big area, you know. You just feel that everybody, people are well, it's such a big country, you just almost feel that you're not worthy enough to be part of it. That's what the feeling you have. And you just think that you're going to do your best so they can be proud that you're part of their country. And I think that it's a very, I felt very humble, and you feel almost like you feel like you're going to want to be a big giant to do something to show them that you appreciate being part of them, you know. It's
It's
something.
nice to hear.
Yes, you do, and you know, when you study history and you think of what the forefathers all went through to build this country and do what they do, and then you have so many of them that destroyed because of dope and all that other stuff. They ought to be sent somewhere where they have hardship, where they have to work. Put them on an island somewhere where they can't get away, but work for their own living, make their own stuff.
Appreciate what they have.
And appreciate what they have. And then I think they will fall on their knees and beg to come back to the main country. And I think it's such a waste, because all the forefathers ever wanted to do is good. And when you think of when they fought the Indians and when they had to fight and all those things they had to make this country great, and look what's happening to it. It makes you sick. You just feel like crying one minute, and the next minute you feel angry and you feel like, I want to do something, but you don't know what you can do. You know?
I can understand that.
And it just, I just wish those people that do all that, maybe they could just pack them on a boat or somewhere and send them somewhere where somebody cracks a whip over them, you know, and makes them realize what they had lost, what they had given up, took for granted.
Because you can see that better than they can, because you've been there.
Yeah,
You don't have
although
those
I
things.
never had anybody crack a whip over me. I mean, I got my spankings from my family, you know.
But you've seen it.
But
You've
I've seen
what it can be like.
what it can be like. You see that domineering, that authority. And I know sometimes people wonder how anybody can let themselves be taken, like the Jews were put in those concentration camps, when you really haven't got any choice. You stand up and they shoot you right there, so what good does it do you to stand up? They can shoot all of them down. There was nobody there that would have done anything about it. Look how many years it took to do anything. And besides that, I think some of them you're brought up to be obedient, do what you're told to do. And I think one thing, what's nice here, the people here think for themselves. I don't condone that they should do what they're told to do. It depends. Somebody tells you to do something wrong, you should have enough self-stamina and not do it. But, I mean, if you think to see something you need to do, you go do it, you know. Where you don't have to ask somebody else, is it all right to do? You just go ahead. And those are things that you don't always get to do overseas. You know, you can't be independent and just go ahead and do something. And, I mean, like I've seen when there was the Anschluss, all the power and how it took over so fast. And, I mean, I didn't really feel the impact like the grown-ups did. But I could see the difference, you know. 10 years old, you see some things, but you don't quite realize, because it's just like when they had sort of a revolution, I really didn't know what a revolution was. I don't know if I was 5 years, maybe I was a little younger than that. And I seen all those soldiers in those big trucks, open trucks, and it was being moved, and they had weapons, you know. And I asked my mother what's going on, and she said there's a revolution. And I said, what's a revolution? She says, don't ask so many questions. I remember that. You know, and whenever I wanted to know something, don't ask so many questions. I remember when I was playing with a little girl, and I had to be home at 11 o'clock. And I asked, is it 11 o'clock yet? And they said, no, you got lots of time yet. The next thing I heard my mother's voice calling my name, and she stood there, and she had the hazelnut bushes. You tie them together like this, and that's what you get spanked with.
For a switch?
Yeah, but there's several of them put together. They're real fine, and it really zings. And boy, she was spanking me, and I run so fast she couldn't keep up with me. Soldiers that were far away from home and got no mail. And so we had one from the Black Forest area. He lost his arm. It was severed right here, you know. And he hadn't had any contact with his family. So we brought him, went on a streetcar and went home. And he cried. He was so happy because that's the nicest Christmas he had that he could ever remember, you know. So we did that summer, like at Christmas time, did something for a stranger. And we would be without meat for a long, long time, so you could get a nice piece of meat and have some roast or something. And to us it was really a pleasure to share and have somebody and cook something real nice. And see, normally when you buy meat over there, it's so different than here. The meat hangs on the walls. They have white tile walls and white tile hooks where the meat hangs on. And so they cut off a piece of meat, but they always put some bones with it when they weigh it. So about 1/3 of your weight is bones, even though the meat is deboned. So you always, if you have 1 kilo, which is a little over 2 pounds, you don't really have a whole lot of meat. And I don't remember for sure how much rations we had, but I don't think it was more than the size of a hamburger a week. So, you know, it took quite a few weeks' savings to have a roast or something like that.
Now, were these hardships mostly because of the American bombing that was going on?
Well, some of that had a lot to do with it, but I think it was that the country was just running out of supplies. That was when they were in Russia. And see, even the first year they were in Russia, the schools were taken over again, and they put sewing machines in, and they used fur coats, and they covered them with white sheets. So they could use them like in Ukraine, where the mountains, where it was cold and they were skiing, so they had white covers, so it wasn't so easily detected. Yeah. And if you had more than one fur coat, you were asked to give them up and donate them to the soldiers so they could line their uniforms or their coats or something, because they wasn't ready for those cold winters. It gets 50, 60 below zero in the Ukraine. It gets cold there.
Now, your brother fought in Russia.
Yes, and he was what they call engineer troops over there, but they call them pioneer over there. But I think you call them engineering troops. They do the bridgeheads, they build the bridge, they have all the boats, and so they can get across.
Across the river.
Yeah, and he was a skier too. They used to ski, fight in the mountains.
Tell me what happened to him.
He was taken prisoner by the Russians and he died. He didn't come back, and my mother didn't know, nobody knew. So after the war was over, and every time there was a train of war prisoners that came back, she would go across the Danube and go to the railroad station and wait and see if he was beyond there. And I don't know for how long a time she did that. And finally, I was over here already before she found out that he died and he wasn't alive. Somebody that was a friend of his came back, but they were in such bad shape that, see, they was mistreated and they didn't have much to eat. But he was in Stalingrad. That was the turning point of the war. I think they had 2 divisions in there. One division wouldn't be taken prisoner and they blew themselves up. The general said he was not going to be taken prisoner by the Russians. He was one of, they used to teach, it's just like a captain goes down with the ship. Well, he was the same way with his troops. The Russians wasn't going to take him. And the Russians were terrible. I mean, when they came into Vienna, my uncle lived in Vienna. They took him to prison, and when they arrested him, he lived on a 3rd floor in an apartment house. They picked him up by his feet and made his head bounce step by step by step, going down 3 flights. That's how they were. My aunt, they always had a police dog, and when my uncle was arrested and was in jail, the Russian soldiers came to the apartment and they was going to rape my aunt. Then of course the dog bit him here in the throat, and the other Russian shot the dog, but it kept my aunt from being raped. And she was quite up in years, And so they used to, it's unbelievable. If I tell you, you probably won't believe me what they did. They just, if you were on the street and they wanted to rape you on the street, they did it. So, I mean, it wasn't nice.
These are the Russians.
The Russians. Everybody was afraid of the Russians. In fact, in the office where I worked, they said that if the Americans came, don't resist too much. Give some resistance, but not too much. But if the Russians come fighting till you close up and see the whites of the eyes, you would say, and defend yourself, and then take a suicide pill, because the way they treat you, you wouldn't want to live. Because what they did lots of times, after they raped you, they always raped everybody. They would cut your stomach open and leave you lay on the street. And now, I have no proof. That's what we were told. Mm-hmm. I've never seen it. I didn't want to see it, And lots of time, if you didn't dress very well and acted kind of like you wasn't all there, they left you alone. You didn't want to wear any jewelry. You didn't want to wear good shoes, because they took them off. If you had a nice pair of boots on, they made you take them off right down the street, and you had to go in your stocking feet in the snow. Mm. They used to come to your houses and take everything out, the light switches, the wooden floors, anything, and then they let you come back into the bare walls. When they first came, they took a hatchet and broke up or just something in your furniture, because they thought you was a capitalist because you had something nice. And yet my brother, when he was in the Ukraine, he sent pictures back where he was with people, and he got along just fine. But he also sent a picture one time I think I will never forget. He put a piece of paper on a chair, and that Russian mother was combing the girl's hair, and the comb was wide. The teeth wasn't close together, and all the little black specks was lice, hair lice. And when they came back, the soldiers on furlough, they had to go to a delousing station before they could even come in contact with the civilians because it was terrible.
Huh.
And you just, well, like we lived, the Danube divided Linz. The Russian section was north of the Danube, and the American section was on the south.
Okay.
So most people that lived on the north, they had occupation on the south side. It'd be just like here the river. You know, if you lived on the west side, you had to go across the bridge
Right.
to do work in Iowa Falls in
We're
town.
downtown. Okay.
Yeah. So when you come to the bridge, you had to have your ID card. Then they sometimes made you stand there for half an hour to an hour and wait. Then you went across the bridge. Then on the other side where you're working, that would be the American section. Then they would ID you, and then they would once a month spray you with DDT powder, and then they stamped your ID card that you've been deloused. And it was sometimes very embarrassing because they had a long tube, kind of like you insecticide here, you know, and they put it up on your arm, on your head, and by your feet, legs, you know, and you just go through
Right out in public.
right out in public. And you walk through there and powder on your head and powder on your clothes, you know. But sometimes you stood there for a long time. And one thing we always had troubles figuring out at that time was how they could smoke a cigarette and chew gum at the same time. You know, that's what the Americans did. They all, you know, was chewing gum and smoking cigarettes. And then I know some little kids that seen the Negroes when they came, and they seen their white hands, and the rest of it wasn't. You know, the hands was light and the rest of it was black. And they tell them that they thought they were dirty, you know. They tried to wash their hands and get them cleaned up. But I don't know.
Well, let me ask you about Hitler. Now, he grew up near where you grew up? Tell me about that.
Well, okay, he was born in Braunau Inn. That's a ways away. But he lived in Leonding, and that's about a couple hours walk from the city of Linz. I should have a map and show you, but Linz, the Danube goes through Linz. Then you go south of it, and you go a ways through the end of the city, and then there's that little town. It's not very big, it's just real small.
Okay.
And there on the edge of town is an artillery field where the soldiers used to practice. And there's also a tower. They had 4 towers in the city where they stored the powder on the edge. See, so when there was a war or anything, why they had all the supplies there. And when you came from Linz and you walked there, you could see the tower with that. But his way to the town was on the bottom of the tower, and you just went that way. It was a road, you know. And I was in the house where he lived. I mean, everybody had access to look at it. And some of the poorer and smaller people, they had a small house. The front was the living quarter. Then the back was where they had the cow and maybe a horse if there was well off, and a pig and some chickens. So when you walked in, you could sometimes smell the manure, you know. But that's where he grew up, in one of those houses. And right across the street, kind of kitty corner, was a cemetery, and that's where his folks' grave was. But he walked from there across that artillery field to the school, and I went to the same school that he did. Not at the same time, you know, I'm much younger. But they said he always walked to that school because when you come there, you had to walk up a hill, and then you walk down the hill to get to that school. I should have thought about getting you a map.
Okay, well, I can check that later. But you indicated here you actually saw him?
Oh yes, I was.
Tell me about that.
Well, first we seen him when he came, and you stayed on the street because you want to see him, you know, on a motorbike. And he came, and you know, when he looked at you, his eyes were so piercing, they were almost black. And you swore he could see what you had for dinner or breakfast. He had very penetrating eyes, and he looked very stern, you know. Of course, he always had his hand out, or he had it like that, one way or the other, and he looked at you. But I was a little scrawny kid, so I stood where they had those chains. The soldiers stood like that. Well, I was stood underneath their hand, you know, the saying I could see, because I was little. I was all muscles and. But one time I was going in the railroad station. I was running up the steps, and he was coming down, and I seen him that close, but I had no personal encounter or anything with him. But it was very close up.
So he saw you too?
Yeah, I imagine he did. I don't know. He didn't say anything to me, but that's almost, you know, like that close. You could.
How many times did you see him altogether?
About 10 times, I think. I was trying to figure out one time, because whatever time he was there, you always went to see him when he was in a parade or when the car came. I've seen him in a hotel window. He used to open up the window, and they had little balconies by the windows in a hotel. He would step out there, and then everybody would shout, you know. It was it just traveled like fire when he was coming to town.
People were excited to see him?
Excited to see him, wanted to see him, you know. And when you're little, you want to see it too. You want to get in on the action. But then, see, as the war went on, then he didn't come anymore, and if he did, nobody paid attention. So this was just the first year.
Did your feelings change towards him?
I don't know if they changed or not, or whether he just didn't expose himself so much. Seems like, see, we had the war. Well, Poland was a blitzkrieg, and they won. Then they won in France. And when they went up north to Norway and stuff, I mean, we never did hear much of it, because I don't think there was any battles or anything. But then when it came to Russia, there was rumors before the war started with Russia, because there was so much moving. We seemed to move the troops moving, and there was one truck after another one, and we seen cannons going. But she didn't ask, you know. That we didn't dare say, well, what are you doing? What's going on? And you just kind of heard whispering and rumors, and then all at once, it was on the radio that the Russia had shot across the border, that they attacked after they had signed a treaty that they would be allies. They broke the treaty and did that. See,
that wasn't true, though, was it?
Well, that's the only story we heard over there. See,
and that was on like an official German radio station.
And that's all you could get. See, they had what they called the Deutsche Rundfunk, and you could only get the Berlin one station. That's all you could get. Now, we had a radio that we could get London, or we could get any foreign station, because it was a big radio, and we had an antenna that we plugged into the wall, and you could get just any station you wanted to.
Could you understand English?
But no, I couldn't understand it. We had turned it on, but we always couldn't understand what they said, so there was no sense of taking any chances of having a neighbor hear you after radio on.
Yeah.
And I know when they checked the radios, when the Americans came, they came in your apartments, and they took radios from you when you had them. And so we unplugged the antenna that went in a wall, and when you did that, you just got nothing but noise. So you didn't get any good sound. So when the Americans came and they wanted to take the radio, and we just said it doesn't work. And they plugged it in, not just the plug part, and it just go, you know, and make all kinds of noises. And I said, kaput, you know. And so they left it. But otherwise, they just threw it out the window, or they took it.
But why did they not want you to have radios?
I don't know. They come in, they were searching for things. My brother had a saber, because with his special uniform, he had one with a lion head on it, and the eyes were rubies, and they took that. And my brother-in-law got rid of all the pictures and all the things that my brother had saved. He got when you took prisoners, you know, like commissars and stuff, those stars and what they had, and he sent them back, and we saved them for him. Well, my brother-in-law was scared when the Americans came, so he took everything, put it in a box, and threw it in the Danube. And I kept one picture of my brother, and he said to throw it away, and I says, no. I said, if they want to arrest me for having a picture of my brother, that's just too bad. I says, I'll let them arrest me, and then when my time comes, I'm going to get even with them, you know. So I saved it. It's the only picture we had of my brother. And they didn't take it. I had
Did the
it there.
Americans treat you pretty well otherwise?
Well, yeah, they had curfews, which they had to, you know. Really, we didn't know that there was any occupation except that when you were standing in food lines waiting to get stuff, they were there. But, and like I said, when you went across the bridge, they were there. You had to have ID cards, and everywhere you went, you seen American soldiers, but none of them ever did anything that wasn't...
Nothing like the Russians did.
Oh no. I mean, and the only thing they did when they first came, I think it was they didn't know, they pulled the plug on all those wine cellars, and the wine was running down the street, you know. Then with stores, people were plundering, and it was people's fault. It was just going in there and taking things and stealing, you know. But you see, it was all the difference. It's hard to understand. When during the war, like Romanian people and or Bulgarian people, all those displaced people that the Germans brought back, you had to take them into your home if you had some room. See, if you were a small family and you had a house like this, you had to take in a family sometimes too. And then you had a strange family occupying your kitchen and your bathrooms and all that, and you had to learn to get along, which wasn't very easy. And sometimes you had families living in your house that you wouldn't want to be caught dead with. But there's nothing you could do because the authority just moved them in, see. So you had all kinds of different people. There are different personalities, different bringing up, different reasons. And it was very difficult, but it was wartime and you had to. It's just like when you had those air raids, everybody go in a bunker, you know, you don't know who you sit by. There's people out in the street, they come into air shelter. And you'd be having strangers sitting there, and some get excited and cry and scream, and some didn't, you know. We was always told if they get hysteric, take a bucket of water and throw it in their face. And that helps, it works, that shock. I had to do it. But see, we had buckets of water standing every little bit, and sand. So if there was the small bombs that start a fire, you had your sand to put them out. You needed the water for the phosphor bombs, because if a phosphor drops on you, on your skin, the only way you can remove it from the skin is underwater. Or the minute you touch it, it would burn the hole in your skin too. So you had to do everything underwater. And there was just a lot of little things in your house, in your rooms. Every room had a bucket of water and a bucket of sand and a mop, so you could put out the fire.
Were the air raids pretty common?
At times we had a lot of them. Then again, there was time when there was nothing. But sometimes, one time we had 1,000 bombers dropping bombs, and then sometimes we just had a few bombers, and sometimes they come at night. Sometimes there'd just be one or two just to keep you, so you had to go in a shelter and you couldn't get your sleep, you know. And sometimes they'd be coming during the daytime. I know I was standing in a food line one time in front of the milk store, and they came and they were shooting with machine guns. Why they did it, I don't know. See, so...
American planes?
Yeah. They were shooting one time when I was going across the bridge. And whenever you heard airplanes, you know, you just put yourself, they have those iron girds, you know, and you just lean against them, so try not that they don't move so they don't see you. And then sometimes there was nothing. You never knew. we had the radio going in the office where it worked constantly, seeing when the music stopped, then they would report that the American, so many fighters and bombers, they'd be coming from Italy and coming north, and it looked like they was going to Munich. Well, then they took a turn and said, no, they're going to Linz, so they're going to Vienna, you know.
So the radio would warn you?
Oh yeah, the radio was on, we had it on. The music stopped, and when the music stopped, why, then you knew there was going to say Achtung, Achtung, you know, and then you listened to where they warned you when the bombers were coming and which way they were going. And then some of them, like my mother and my sister, they automatically every morning before 10 o'clock went to the bomb shelter. There was a real good bomb shelter by the Danube where those mountains are, the rocks are granite rocks, and they just dug those tunnels, and you had to bring your own chair. And you sat there, and then when it was over with, right, then you walked home again. But see, my mother was older and my sister was pregnant, so they couldn't walk as fast. The other bomb shelters wasn't very safe. They were fine when they built them, when they had the small bombs, but those big 500-pounders, they wouldn't hold it. And they put a grater in your street that you could almost set a small house in it. They're big. We had a bomb next door, next to us, and it almost took a whole room, well, a big area, like from the window to here, made a big hole like this. See, they come down this way and go that way, and then landed in a basement, and then they defused it.
And that was close to your house?
Yeah, right next to us. We was in an apartment, and it just, I mean, it was defused, but we didn't know until after they defused it you couldn't go home because it could blow up any time. But that was one of them too that was sabotaged, you know, more or less. And they had lots of them. Then for a while they had those bombs where there would be more than one tight. They had strings or something, or chains or something, where it was a whole, like 4 of them come down at one time in one area. And quite a few of those were where they had sand in them.
They wouldn't go off.
They wouldn't go off, but you never knew. Sometimes they were in there. You could always tell when they were because there was a hole in the ground, see, where they went in, the size of the bomb, maybe a little bigger. And so after the air raid was over with, they walked the area where a lot of bombing was going on to see where there were holes, where there was bombs
to look
in
for
there.
unexploded bombs.
And of course in houses it was easy because the bomb laid there. It didn't go. It just usually ended up in the basement, or if it was on the street, it just made a hole where it went, but it didn't blow up. And but they were pretty good sized bombs.
Yeah, 500 pounds is pretty good.
Yeah,
size.
they're good size. They're about that big around, you know. Of course, when you're young, everything looks bigger too. You know, maybe now, maybe it doesn't look so big now, you know.
Well, how old were you when the war was over?
Well, it was over in 45, so it was
27?
20. No, I was born in 28. So I was
Okay,
18,
so you'd only be 17.
18 years old, yeah. Yeah, I went, I had 2 years of college, but during the war you could take tests and enroll, you know, and then between the college years you had to give 6 weeks of free work, either on a farm or in a gun factory, as a thankfulness for being privileged to go to school. And so I didn't want to work in the factory. I wanted to go out in the country on the farm because I figured you'd get fresh air and you'd get something to eat. So I was very fortunate. I had a real nice place. It was owned by the church, the Catholic church. And it was right next to the lake, so I could go swimming every night too. But I really learned a lot and I worked hard. I was supposed to be in the kitchen, help a cook. The cook was about that big. And the first thing I had to do, they butchered and I had to clean the intestines. Well, I've never done that. And I just gagged and I gagged and I gagged, and there was a faucet there and I held those intestines there. And And I, nope, you know, then I had to wash dishes, and there was a big wooden bucket about that size, and I put all the silverware in it, thinking, well, I can speed it up and get them done in a hurry. And oh, did she rake me over the coal, because they were hollow handle silver sterlings, and you don't soak them in water, which I didn't know. And so she really was mad at me. So I went to the boss and I said, you know, I come from the city. Don't you have any work for me outside? I says, I don't like to be indoors. I didn't want to tell him that the cook scolded me, you know, and all that. So I just said, I like to have fresh air. And he says, well, I'll check you out tomorrow. He says, you best be awake at 4 in the morning. I rap at your door and you better be out, you know. And so I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep anyhow because we had straw sacks. There was just a wooden, kind of like a box like, and there was a straw sack, and that's what you slept on. They cannot watch any more TV.
And that was recently?
Yeah, that was just a few years back when we was home. So they are strict on that respect.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and they still take the walks on weekends. They go out in the country and walk for 2-3 hours.
Really?
If you have a dog, you take them for a walk. We used to have a dog, and that's how come I know so much about that artillery field, because we had a police dog, and we had to walk him as a rule 2 hours a day, sometimes more. So it was fun to walk up the hill, past all those villas, and where we walked, there was all those villas where the Jews used to live, because they had the beautiful homes. And then, of course, it was occupied by the Germans or by some Nazi person, even if it was Austrian. And they was always so beautiful because they had a lot of different gardens and trees and different fences, and they all had dogs. Some had boxers, some had police dogs, some had Dobermans, you know. They all were different. But we had a German Shepherd, and he was an excellent swimmer. And we go to the Danube and swim, and if we give him a stick to have and we hold on to the stick, he would swim ashore with us, you know. But and he was very protective. One time I was standing on the street talking with some girls, and we was taking up most of the sidewalk, and the man touched me on the shoulder and said, excuse me, you know, the dog had him right here, he didn't bite you, but
wow.
Oh yeah.
Just from touching your shoulder.
He didn't touch you. I mean, and when a little niece had in a baby buggy, you can't, you know, you put the dog and you say pass out, and you can go in the store, get your groceries, and come back, and the dog would be sitting there watching the baby buggy, and nobody would even look at the baby, and he'd growl, you know. And at that time, the stores were different. They had drawers. The whole wall was full of drawers, like rice, flour, sugar, and you go and you buy a half a pound of rice and maybe so much sugar. Then you go to the milk store to buy your milk and your butter and your eggs. Then you go to the butcher store and you buy your meat. See, you didn't have
Take a
it
long
all.
time to get groceries.
Yes, but it was usually side by side. And then at night, why they had those iron gates that they shut. So, I mean, you couldn't get in them. But then a lot of that was put aside when Hitler came. I mean, they changed a lot of things. A lot of it was to the good, and some of it wasn't. I mean, what you seen on the outside all seemed to be good, and what wasn't good was you didn't know about it unless you had somebody that was involved.
That's a good point.
You didn't say anything because you didn't want to be involved. I remember I went getting like potatoes and apples when my brother was in Russia. Of course, he had a lot of soldiers under him, and when they come back, they always had to stay as a rule overnight in Linz, because from there, from the trains the next day went to the different towns where they lived. So they always stayed overnight with us, and we always treated them very royally, as good as we could. And they all was little farmers or something, so they said we should come and get apples or potatoes, and so I would go. And that one time I had one suitcase full of potatoes and one full of apples, and I got to the station here. The Gestapo was searching, So I went and I walked home with those big suitcases. I got home about midnight, and my mother was frantic because she didn't know what happened to me, you know. And but when I got home, I just felt like I didn't have any arms left, you know. But it helped to have the same weight on each side.
Mm-hmm. How far did you have to walk?
Oh, I don't remember. It was quite a ways. This was in the afternoon when I got to the station, and I got home at midnight. So you know, it was a long walk.
Mm-hmm.
But it was. I didn't want to take a chance of getting picked up by the Gestapo. See, if you had food, then it was called a hamsterer, and that was against the law to do. But yet you had to have it because you couldn't survive on what you got.
Mm-hmm.
And apples, and we always try to have apples in a cellar for air raids.
Oh, yeah.
Because if your house was bombed and you were covered up, you could survive if you ate an apple a day.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had your moisture and you had your sugar and what you needed. And then see, we had to pound if you were ever covered. They told you to keep knocking because sometimes it took 3-4 weeks before they got you out. We had a basement, we had pillars, wooden supports, about that far apart for the whole basement, see. And
So that would be more structurally sound.
yes, and you was always told to either stand in a doorway because that was sound. And when they were flying low and shooting with machine guns, you threw yourself on the floor. Because when they shot in through the windows, they could hit you. And when I worked in the office, they, I had to put all those office machines away. And sometimes it took 10-15 minutes before I got to the bunker. By that time, while the bombs were flying, or those shrapnels from the anti-aircraft, they would fall down, and then they hit those oil tank wagons, and then they bounce off. So one of them bounced into my gas mask, which was metal, you know, had a metal housing, and it was lodged in my gas mask. So I was lucky I had it on. It would have been my hip otherwise. But see, when they bombed, we was on sort of a peninsula. The Danube was going around this one. Here was the arm of water where the U-boats and all the ships came in, you know. And we was on a piece of land, and the bunkers were on top of the ground. And they were built on a slope, and there was 3 meters of cement and iron and steel. And the one where we were in there, it was bomb-proof. The other one, they hadn't finished and hadn't put all the steel on it. There wasn't when they had all those big bombs. There was about 2,000 people that were killed in that one. And that one we was in, when they were bombing, the water underneath, you know, side, it just made you go like that. The floors was moving, and everybody was thrown on a pile, you know. And you come out, and the water was just silver with dead fishes. When they exploded, it's a feeling you can't explain. It's just like
horrible.
Like when the artillery was shooting, we had a door that had a rubber strip around to make it airtight, and it just ripped it open, and the flames were shooting. It just something you don't want to really think about it. When we was first married, I used to get those nightmares, and I just dig into Andy's arm and I shout, you know. I suppose I was giving orders or something. I was first aid, see. I had to take care of those bunkers. I was 14 when I could give morphine shots, you know. But it makes you grow up young because you have all that responsibility, and you're always brought up to, if you're supposed to do it right, you know. And like I said, it makes you grow young, you know.
How long do the air raids usually last?
Oh, sometimes they lasted an hour, sometimes they lasted 2, sometimes not even that long. It just depended on how many bombers there was. Sometimes there'd just be some of them coming, you know, and going, then there'd be another wave coming. You think you're done, and then you're not. And they had those sirens in every block on top of the houses. So they're the same sirens like you have here for tornadoes. Tornado,
really?
yeah, they go up and down and go up and down. And when it was over with, they had one single sound. Then you could leave the bunker.
So when you hear the tornado siren here in Alamo Falls, does that bring back some
It
bad
does.
memories?
Yes, it does bring back some. Well, the first time when I was here and I heard the siren for a fire, I didn't know what was going on, and I said, "What's going on?" You know, and they said, "Well, there was a fire." But you get used to it. I mean, I think you enjoy not to have to think about it, because life is beautiful and it is short, and it's amazing how much people can endure. And I don't think anybody really has realized how much a person can endure, and if they can stay appreciative of things, I think they have it conquered. And other people, they're not all made up the same. But I know with like an heir, you're brought up to help, you know, and my younger sister, she's almost 6 years younger than I am. Whenever I had to make the rounds and be gone, why she'd be standing by the door and she'd be having her fingers crossed, because she, you know, you believe you cross your finger, everything goes good. Until I come back, when I open up the door again, she had a big sigh. And she, you know, she sat down again. And those bunkers, they were kind of like a tunnel, and there was benches on each side, and you could sit on those. But they wasn't very strong. See, that's why on rocks in the mountains, when they did that, that's where my mother and sister always went to. I told you that. So
It's pretty nerve-wracking, I suppose, to sit through it.
well, yeah, well, they're damp, the rock sweats, you know, and well, you just listen to the bombs when they fall close by. You feel the pressure, you know. Nobody says anything. You just sit there and you look at each other and you be quiet. Nobody knows what to say. You never know who you're sitting by. You're afraid to say something that's held against you, you know. So it's just very quiet there. But it's quite an experience. You know?
Sounds like it.
But you learn to be happy with little things. Like when we went in the morning and left, we hugged each other because we never knew whether we saw each other at night. We come back at night and, you know, one by one we come in, and it just seems like when I've seen the movies when the bombers come back to London, you know, and they count them, I kind of felt we was doing that in our lifetime, because we were glad when each one come back, and we was all in one, and nobody was hurt. My sister was drafted into the Air Force, but she wasn't flying or anything, but it was an anti-aircraft station, and she was in Steyr. That's where they were building little cars, and they was manning the light, you know, they had to shine the lights at the bombers, and so the whole platoon or whatever it was that was bombed, and she was the only survivor. And she came, and it had to be maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. She walked home. She didn't know what to do. There wasn't anybody alive, and she came. The uniform, everything was burned, you know, it was a mess. And so she came to the bunker, and it was quite a feeling, you know, when that happens. And she says, I didn't know where to go, so I come home, you know. And see, the man was drafted from 16 to 62. And the women, I think, was 17. And
They weren't drafted, though. They were volunteers?
I don't remember. I thought that when you were 17, if you wasn't working or doing anything, that you had to go in the service. Okay. I don't know whether they drafted you, or whether they just made you go so you wouldn't get a ration card. I don't know. Because, see, unless you had a job, you didn't get a ration card. And after the war, I mean, if you didn't have a job, you you didn't have a ration card, and you had
Starved.
you starved unless you knew somebody. So everybody did all kinds of work, so you'd have a stamp that you was working. Then you got your ration card, and the rations wasn't very good anyhow, but it kept you from starving.
Yeah, better than nothing.
Yeah, you didn't get a whole lot, but you had bread. And the same thing with ration cards for clothing. It was ridiculous. You got 100 stamps. Well, if you wanted to have a coat, that took up almost the whole amount. You got one pair of shoe a year. Well, when you're growing, one pair isn't enough. My toes were always sticking out in front, making a hole in the shoes because there just wasn't room for them to grow. So we did have a lot of shoes with no toes. That way, you could expand. But in wintertime, you couldn't do that because it got too cold. So you learned how to do things, like an old man's suit. You could rip apart. Out of the trousers, you make a skirt, and you reverse the jacket and make it smaller and make it for a woman. You could make a beautiful suit out of it. But you didn't always get a men's suit. That wasn't so easy. Lots of times you had to have stuff to get appointments. You wanted to go to a dentist. Well, if you didn't have a package of cigarette to give them or something, you didn't get an appointment to see the doctor. You still had to pay, But if you brought something, or maybe some
A little bribe or something.
yeah, bacon or butter or something, you had to bribe to get the appointment. And they didn't give you Novocaine. I mean, they pulled your tooth without it.
Is that right?
Oh, yes. I remember standing in line to go to the dentist many times. And during the war, we one time walked to a place, was a butcher. He butchered the horse. And we could get a kilo of meat, horse meat, without the ration cards. You paid for it. So all of us went. And we didn't stand together, and we didn't talk, so they wouldn't know we was a family. And we fixed our hair differently, so we didn't look alike. One wore a scarf, kind of like an old grandma scarf, and the other one didn't wear, and one wore a turban, so we all looked different. And we stood there, and finally they opened up at 5 in the morning. But you have to stand there a long time to be in front line, because if not, time you get there, it's gone, see? So we got that horse meat, and then we made, you make spicy food out of it. You put lots of garlic and paprika and stuff in it. And you really couldn't tell the difference between the beef. It was just like a cow, more or less. But it had a sweeter flavor to it. It doesn't have... Then, one time we was invited to somebody that had a delicious dinner. We thought it was veal, but it was a cat. And we didn't know it, see.
A cat?
Cat. You didn't leave your dogs run loose, and you didn't leave your cats run loose, because people caught them and cooked them, So, when the Americans came, I remember when the tanks rolled in, that rumbling, everything shook. The windows shook if you still had them, the floors shook, and they came in the evening, they rolled in. And then there was just endless tanks. See, we had a couple, 3 days of artillery fights. They were fighting, and you couldn't get out because you couldn't move, because you never knew when they were coming. They were up on the hill and back of it, and you could hear when it comes, but you never knew when it came. So we was just kind of stranded inside in the basement. But that artillery, it can really do a lot of damage. You think bombs are bad, but the artillery, I think, is almost worse. Because the bombers, when they're coming, and you stay there and you have a period of time. But with the artillery, it was day and night, and you never knew. You think,
no warning.
No warning, nothing. The bombs, the whistle. They have that little propeller. And when you see the bombs coming, they don't come straight down. They kind of go in an angle. So if you're outside, you can run the opposite direction to miss the bombs. But with the artillery, you can't do that because you don't know it's coming. All you know is you hear the impact.
So that went on for about 3 days?
3 days, I think it was, 2, 3
So there was
days.
resistance from German troops in
Well, there
your
was
town?
some resistance. I don't think they had a whole lot of resistance. There wasn't that much left. I remember the Gauleiter, which would be like a governor for the state. He was going to make what they call a festung out of Linz. You know, he thought we should do it because Hitler was so close, lived so close to Linz, you know.
Make a what out of it?
A festung, that
Is it like
means
a fortress?
fortress,
Mhm.
And so the other people, they put the gun on him and said no. So they said there's no sense of wasting more life. But they told us, you know, like we built between on the street when there's houses on each side. They take rocks and they build the wall, and then they put those bazookas, you know. So when the tankers come, they hit that wall, and then it blows up. And they didn't do that with the Americans, but they did that in case the Russians came. When the Russians, it was one time, they sounded the siren, and when they sounded it for 5 minutes, that meant that the Russians were coming into the city area. Then we had to all get manned, you know, and be in resistance. When they came, they didn't do that. They just, you know, fought, I think. They just, we had such a fear of the Russians that you didn't want them. It's just like my brother used to write. He says, well, we're out here to keep them from coming to your door. And I think if he had known that they were at the door, I think, you know, it really would have made them all ill. Because the people themselves don't want the war. It's the politicians and that cause a lot of that. And see, now, like the First World War was caused by the Serbs, like Bulgaria and all those Baltic countries, they're all powder cakes. Everybody, they have temperaments that we're not accustomed to. And in my estimation, I think they should fight their own wars, because we can't think ourselves into their thinking. It's just like take for instance an Indian. They were brought up differently than the whites, and when they fought, I mean, you know, they took the religion was different, so you can't think yourself into it. You know what you're taught what they're thinking, but really you can't put yourself in their skin and think like, well, neither can we over there. It's just like you take the Iraq and all those. We can never stoop to their way of thinking because we're brought up differently.
Too many differences between us.
That's right. And what we think is terrible, what they do, it's common for them. And I just feel very sad every time an American life is lost for them, because, and I hope I'm not being mistaken, I mean, every life is worth defending, but that's the way they are. They've always fought. They don't know any different. So I don't know, I think we could find, or should find, a different method to help them, to settle their differences instead of our lives. Now, if that was possible, I think we'd really have something accomplished. And maybe if a lot of people that are very knowledgeable, maybe they could come up with something, and it takes somebody that has lived there, knows how they feel, what their actions are. And
Very good point.
yes, it doesn't take long for them to blow their stack up and get mad, you know, ready to kill, and give their lives, and they don't appreciate it. They think we're in their way. They think we just think we're a big country, and we want to force our way of thinking on them. I don't think they appreciate it.
I think you're right.
And I feel that it's a waste of life. Whenever you waste a life, it's wrong.
Does the kind of your feelings about Vietnam too, that the people
Yeah.
there didn't really appreciate what
I don't
you
think
tried to
they
do for
did.
them?
I don't think so.
Mhm.
I think that they like the idea of having it better,
Mhm.
but I don't think that maybe a few of them would, but
Mhm.
a very small percentage. Because their race different, their environment is
Different
different.
culture.
Altogether.
Mhm.
And it's just like, well, you take the Americans, you go to a city, they are different than the Midwest. I feel the Midwest, that's the true American, the farmers. They're connected with the land, they're connected with God, you help each other.
Mhm.
You go in the city, you lay on the ground and you're hurting, they don't help you to step over you, they don't want to be involved,
Sometimes that's true. Yeah.
you know. And you're out here in the Midwest, why you wouldn't hear of something like that. Somebody's hurt, you run and you help.
That's true.
And what a wonderful feeling it is, and I think we should try and keep it. And but we won't keep it if we have all those big foreign countries come in and buy stuff. You have all the, Oriental people coming in and buying all the farmland, and taking over. Where's the American spirit?
Mhm.
They wouldn't care about America.
I think that'll change the way people live and think around
I
here.
think so. I think so.
You mentioned Oriental people. During the war, were you very much aware of the war in the Pacific with Japan, or were there news reports on that on German
Yes,
radio?
but not a whole lot.
Mhm.
Not a whole lot. We were glad for it because we thought it weakened the enemy.
Mhm.
You know, I used to have a lot of nightmares about the parachutes coming. You know, you hear so much. And I used to get dreams and nightmares that the parachutes are coming down, and they're shooting the window and all that kind of stuff. But we did, amongst the people, not in the news media, but amongst the people, you heard that the Americans are kind. They were talking about so many Americans having cousins over there, and that they don't do anything, and it was good to children. I know children always knew. I mean, some children didn't even know what a candy bar was, because during the war you didn't see any chocolate.
Mhm.
And so the Americans would give them candy. At first they wouldn't take it. But then when they found out what it was, then they were begging all the time, which was kind of embarrassing sometimes, But nevertheless, they just wasn't aware what candy was like.
Mhm.
And you see, the Germans, I mean, the army or the politicians, Goebbels was real good for propaganda. He really knew how to do it. When we heard something, well, like Hess, when he disappeared in England, everybody was talking and wondering what happened to him. See, and all that was on the news that it happened, and they didn't know they didn't say what it was. When there was a U-boat sinking an American ship or an English ship, they always stopped the music and said Sondermeldung, Sondermeldung, it means special message, and that so many ton ship was sunk, and the U-boat, German U-boat sunk it, and then they were heroes, I know that one of the people that worked where I worked shot down an American soldier from an airplane, and that's all I heard. I don't know how he shot him or what happened. They didn't talk about, and you didn't ask, and you didn't dare say anything, But he got a citation for doing it, and so I think it just depends on which side the war is on. And but I was glad that the Americans came where I was and not the Russians. Now my sister had moved when the Americans took Linz over. Linz is divided by the Danube, and 3 months later, the Americans gave up the northern part of Austria, where we lived, to the Russians, because the Americans got one section in Vienna, and we just could not understand, and we just thought the Americans were weak for doing that. And it really, in our estimation, it made us look down on the Russians for giving us that part of the country and the people to the wolves, so to speak.
Look down on the Americans.
Yeah, for doing that, because we felt, here you are a conqueror, and you're giving in to the Russians. You're always going to be doing that, you know. And the Austrian people begged them, give us some weapons. We will push the Russians out of Austria if you give us weapons. We do it. But, you know, of course they wouldn't do it. They stopped, and we could never understand that. Then after the Russians moved in, now my sister gave up her apartment and everything and moved south of the Danube because she didn't want to be in a Russian zone. And I couldn't live there either because they would have arrested us girls, and they told us in the office the Austrians couldn't help us because they were defeated. The Americans couldn't help us because we wasn't citizens. So the Russians could have arrested us and sent us to Siberia, and we wouldn't have had any help. I snuck across one time for Christmas to be with my family, but I was so scared because there was a Russian that was following me. And, you know, you didn't have street lights or anything, and I think that when I got home, I know the front door, I had a key for it, but if you went through an archway to the back door, you could get in, and they wouldn't always know that there was a door on both sides. So I snuck in that archway and got to our door, and I locked the door quick, and I was still in back of the door when the Russian tried to get in. And I'm glad he didn't have anything to listen because my heart was beating so hard. I think he could have heard it through the door, you know. But I was really scared because you never know what they would do.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't look, I think if he really had some bad intentions, he probably could have done something on the street, but he didn't. So, I mean, I was very fortunate myself. But they told me in the office I should never do that again and go across the line. But it wasn't safe. Things that happened, like if you traveled from Linz to Vienna, that was around 100 miles or so. And when you got from Upper Austria to Lower Austria, that's just the name of it. It's not because it's a lower country, but it lies closer to Hungary, see? So it's not up, it's you're going down, see? And so it, they would stop the trains, and they would do things like they sometimes have taken good-looking girls out of the train and raped them right in front of everybody. See, they did things that animals wouldn't even do that. And they did it to American soldiers. They didn't rape them, but they took the jeeps away in their uniforms.
They did what?
They took, when an American would be traveling in the Russian territory to go to Vienna, sometimes they took the jeep away in their uniforms. The Russians would.
They're very cruel people.
Yes. Maybe they, well, I think at that time the communism probably was all on their mind. It was their God. It was everything, see. I don't know if they changed now or not. I hope they did. I mean, it sounds like they might have. But I would still remember what happened. And I hope I'm not wrong for remembering. But you do, because when you're little, it has such an impact on you. I think it'd be just like if you grow up in a home and your parents mistreat you. I think you remember that all your life. And this is the same way when you see terrible things happening and you're a teenager. I don't think you ever forget it. You forget it because you want to, but there's something inside that
part of it stays with you.
And when the news is that when it used to be the Russians were doing this and they were conquering that, I'd be getting that feeling inside, you know. And I don't think you ever get away from it. Maybe
you kind of mentioned that in your essay about encourage them to read history and see what nations who have never been won to trust.
Yes.
You're talking about Germany or Russia?
No, all of them. for instance, I think if you make a pact with a country, you also study the history. You go with Russia, it used to be the Hunnen, they call it the Hunnen. They were fighters. They never had a home. When they killed an animal, they put it on a horse and they rode on it all day to tenderize it, because they didn't want to build a fire and cook it. And there was a tribe that were fighters, and you know, that goes down in history. I mean, there's a little bloodline that gets passed on and passed on. In some people it shows up more, in some people it doesn't show up so much. But when you study history, in some countries that you could never trust, I mean, to your face, they're your allies, and then they turn their back when things get rough. Now, if you trust those people, you're doing the wrong thing, because your whole country, like if American politicians trust the country because they talk good to them. But really, when you stop and study the history way back to where the country originated, were they steadfast people or were they sneaky people? If they were sneaky, you can be nice to them, but don't make a pact, because they turn around and hit you.
Don't trust them.
No, no. I mean, you can be nice to people and still not trust them, because we trust them too quick. And then look how many people suffer and die for it.
It's true.
And now in school they don't teach history like they used to. I was told they don't even teach the American history like they used to. And I think that's wrong. The way it happened, how the forefathers fought, what they gave up, so we have a nice living. Because children don't really know, and how can they appreciate something if they were never told?
That's true.
And when they grow up, what are they going to raise their children with? Barney or some of those TV things? You know, I think that they should start with respect for history and God. I think it's important. I mean, the people came over here because they wanted to have a religion of their desire. Now, this is wonderful, but now I often wonder, is a cult considered a religion? And cults are dangerous. You know, some people that have a certain cult, it makes them strong, but it still is dangerous because it changes their mind, their way of thinking.
It's true.
And you know, I'm just thinking of all those innocent people that all their life worked hard, never done anything wrong, and the children grow from those homes, and here all at once it's just like there's going to be a pack of wolves, and they won't know what to do. And all they know is what they've been kind of half or told on TV, and if they don't have that history packed down good to them, they don't know what the value of the country is, unless the parents do it at home. But how many parents have time?
Very few.
Very few, because everybody has to work so hard or many hours to make a living. We raised our standard of living, so it takes more. And I don't know which is better, whether to have a lower standard and be home with your family and make your own entertainment, or whether it is to live better and
I know, it's a dilemma.
It is hard to know what's right. I think everybody has to know themselves what is
Decide for their own family.
But I think family life is very important, and I think history is important. And like I said, to me, I worry about Washington and all the politicians, because they go haphazard. Now, I hope I'm not going to be beheaded because I said that. I wouldn't dare say that overseas when Gestapo was there, you know. But I feel that way, that that we just go blindly into things. I was so worried, you know, when we had the war not long ago, but we had a good general, I think, and it was done well. But why did we pull out when we did? See, that's
people
what
say that.
we always doing that. When there was the Second World War, they stopped because it was a pact when Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt, when they all met in Creighton and had that treaty, they decided that, I guess, if I know my history right, maybe not. Why did they stop? They could have just pushed the Russians all the way back, and we won't have to face them.
Of course, the Russians were our ally then.
But then why did the ally, if they'd have studied the history, they knew they couldn't be trusted to be one? When have they ever stuck to somebody? They'd be an ally for a while, but when it looks like it's going to be bad for their favor, then they turn.
That proved to be true more
See?
than once, I think.
Yes. So if you're going to be an ally, study all the way back to the first person that started, you know, the first, what they're like. Now you go to the Finns, the Finland people, those you can trust. They always have been. They're a strong personality, their nature, but that is, they're up in the northern part. People that live up there have to be that way, but
they have to get along to
they have
survive.
to get, yes, and they're just built altogether different. When you go south, it's different. The climate is hot, the tempers are hot, the energy is less, bound to be, because your blood is different when it's hot. Look how just this hot summer, how people feel differently.
It's true.
Even here in Iowa Falls, everybody is hot. Your temperament is different. You're not as easygoing because it just doesn't let you.
Yeah.
The heat gets the best of you.
That's a good
And
point.
just think what it is when you go down to the equator.
Live there all year round.
Yeah. And also now overseas in Austria, they have 2-hour noon hour. But the reason for that being is that most of them have a bicycle, go home to eat. They don't eat. They don't carry their lunch. But then they work later at night and earlier in the morning.
Yeah.
But they have the 2 hours noon. It's not that they take a siesta, but if you go home in a streetcar, it takes 20 minutes to half an hour. And that long time again to come back. If you fix a bite to eat, you know, you have an hour because it's not good for you to eat it so fast, you know. And if you don't have anybody at home to have it ready for you, you got to get it ready, you know.
A lot of people eat at home.
Yes,
when
they do.
work
Yeah.
downtown or whatever.
Yeah, not very many go to the restaurants. They eat at home. And they go out to eat in the restaurant for special occasions, you know. But they go home and all the stores close, and we had to get used to every time we go overseas. You know, you get up in the morning, and when you're family, you yak, and then you have breakfast and you yak. Then you go to the store and buy something what you're gonna have at noon. You know, you get your eggs and you get your stuff, and then by that time, you know, we're ready to go uptown. See, so we hop on a streetcar or on the bus. Well, we get uptown, we look around, we get to the store, and here it's close up. It's 12 o'clock. See, and it takes you a while to get used to it, to change your schedule a little bit, you know. But it's kind of funny. Of course, some stores, they have a place to eat, you know. You can eat. They have supermarkets now that they're tremendous, you know. You see all those things, and they have, just like here, the aisles full of cans of goods, you know. And
are there any signs of the war still in Linz? Has it all been
no, that
prepared
has
and
all
cleaned up?
been prepared. You could for a long time, when you're in the American zone, it was being rebuilt. I mean, the Americans put also much money in it, you know. And really, when you think about it, it makes your heart bleed, because I don't think the American people realize how much of their tax money goes to other countries. I mean, where there was a war and they damaged things, they practically rebuilt everything and made it better and really nice, modernistic. You know. Then you went across the Danube and you go in the Russian zone, and it's just like day and night.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the houses still showed where there were bombs. I mean, the mess was picked up, but it wasn't rebuilt. Somehow, they're not occupied now, but the
Right.
you see the Russians, you see them walk, and it just feels like somebody's pushing your chest in. You know. I think it's maybe the propaganda was so much because they always showed the Russian commissar and the way their uniform, the paint comes out and the cap and the color of the uniform is so much of a superior. And it always showed those cheeks, you know. All the Balkans have those cheeks, which is part of their trade. But the emphasizes with the mean look of the eye and the mouth. It always showed a tooth gone or something, you know. And you still have that bred into you so much that when you see one of those, it just, you know, you just almost
Fear.
feel, yeah, the fear. That's going to happen. And
But these were like posters and things. That
posters they used to have up,
But they didn't do that. They didn't portray Americans or British. did
No,
they?
no.
Just
The only thing
Russians.
they ever had posters everywhere is about whispering and about the person sitting next to you may be a spy, not to be discussing what you had heard, because you could cause of maybe somebody that's your family being killed because you talked and shouldn't have. And I think that, I mean, you just didn't talk about stuff. I didn't talk about it because I didn't want to get my family in trouble when I really didn't know what I was talking about was true. That hearsay is bad because you don't know. And yet I know they whispered and they talked. We knew about the atom bombs. I heard about it. I knew they were building it. I knew where they were talking about, where they was doing it. We knew all about it before they even shot them, you know.
You're talking about the German efforts to build
Yeah.
an atom bomb?
You know, they was talking about all that. And then when the German had the FAU 1 and the FAU 2, the V, when they were
V1
shooting
and
that,
V2.
we all knew where they were at, you know, but you didn't talk about it because you wouldn't dare, because you always had the fear of the Gestapo. And, you know, you just, and sometimes, even here, you get some mail where people kind of bossy, domineering, almost makes you feel like it's the Gestapo. that they have acquired some of their techniques. And I don't think they used to write letters like that. When I first came over here, everybody was polite. And now they just, you know. And so I don't know whether they're forgetting what this country was made of, and they just want to push and shove or whatever. I don't
Like
know.
you say, we need to pay attention to history.
We do, and I think that, I hope the schools, I don't know how you could change it. I know it's going to take parents to do it. It takes somebody to move it and get going. Go to the school board and say, hey, we want some history. We want the kids to learn. We want them to know how this country was made. How many kids know that, how many parents, give their lives to fight the Indians? What hardship they went with? When you think of what they traveled in those covered wagons, what they did and what they did without to build this country, who could do that now? I mean, there's always a few. There always will be. But so many of them, they just don't even care to work.
Yes.
Gimme, 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 you know, which give them some self-esteem, somehow motivate them to study history, to see what they did and how they did it, and then see if we can do it better.
Well, that's one reason why I'm doing these tapes. I hope that people will take an interest in this period of history, and
Yeah.
I think it's important to preserve this for future
I think
generations.
it's nice you're doing that.
Well, I'm enjoying it. It's
Are you
interesting.
really?
Oh, very interesting. This is one of the most interesting ones I've done.
Oh, really?
I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
and I was really worried about it because I didn't think I had anything to,
Oh, no.
to
very
tell you
interesting.
to.
Because you're giving me the other side of the war that we wouldn't have otherwise with
Which-
these tapes.
Yeah, you know, I don't, we didn't really feel any hatred, but yet you had that hurt feeling inside, you know. And yet when you think about how many girls married American soldiers, what I was really amazed when I came over here, I thought, all the young women are going to hate me because I took one of their men. Really. But they didn't. If they did, they didn't show it. I mean, I've can only say nice things about people here. And how gracious they are and how helpful they are. And I mean, it's Iowa Falls has so many wonderful and other places too. But I very strongly feel that the Midwest is the heart of the country. They still have the true American people that feel they're patriotic, and I'm sure people in the cities are too. But they're so involved, go with the crowd, go with this and go with that, that they don't take the time. And I hope that maybe the Midwest can start bringing things back to the schools that they have lost. History is so important. Discipline is important. And discipline starts at home. And why not have the parents do the disciplining instead of the policeman or the teacher?
It should start at home.
It should start at home. Not that we always succeed, that's not it, you know, but at least you can try. And I you know, when we did something, if the teacher sent home a note when I was a kid, the parents would have spanked you. Now here it's the opposite. The teacher sends home a note and the parents are outraged and they get angry at the teacher. And I'm sure there's sometimes teachers are partial. Maybe some kids are always nice and cuter than others.
Yeah.
And some of them kind of bully. But when I speak of bully, I tell you what happened when I was a little girl. I don't know if I was 6 years old, maybe a little older. My older sister was trying to teach me how to swim. And I was sitting at the edge of the pool, dangling my feet. And the kid pushed me in and I almost drowned. When I come to, it was giving me artificial respiration. And all I could see, I looked up and I see my sister with both fists just beating that boy. And he was a bully. He was fat. You know, I'm not having anything against fat people, don't get me wrong, because we have a lot of fat people in our family, and they're lovely people.
He was a big boy, though.
But he was a big boy and had that, you know, bullish look on his face. And just because I was a girl, he wanted to push me in, see? And my sister made short order of him.
She defended you, huh?
Well, I know that one time from school, I walked home with a girl from Germany, and she was always knocking the Austrians. And I just told her, I says, stop doing that. I says, my brother has all those medals. He's got the Iron Cross. I says, they're using the Austrian engineers to fight the bridgeheads and all that. I says, have you ever heard of a German engineer group that done that? I says, I haven't. Maybe you have. So I said, quit talking about us Austrians being nothing. I says, maybe we're a little country, but I says, we're proud of what we have. And I says, you don't see us bullying some other buddy to do something. We leave them alone. We live our life, but if you need help, we help you. But we don't force ourselves on you. And so the next day she started in again. And I said to her, I said, I see her yet. If you don't quit knocking us Austrians. I'm gonna knock your teeth in. She didn't. Before I knew it, I knocked 2 of her front teeth in. So the next, I thought, oh my God, what's gonna happen to me now? But it happened so fast, you know. And I was just, because I had a brother, and he had 12 medals, and he was hit and injured, and he was even out fighting when he was bandaged up. And then I had a cousin and I had an uncle. They were all in the service. And I just didn't think it was fair for them to come to Austria, live there, take some good places, you know, good positions, and then put us down. I just, even though I was only 12 or 13 years old, I just thought that was terrible. And so the next day the director from the school called me in, and he says, what's this? What happened? So I told him. I said, you know, and I told him about my brother and my people that are in there. I says, they all have gotten medals. They all been fighters. And I says, although we had an Anschluss and we're all one country, I says, we're still Austrians and they're still Germans. And I says, we should get along. But I don't go and tell her the Germans are no good. I don't tell her that what they're doing wrong. And I says, I don't think there's ever a country that doesn't have something that isn't quite like that you approve of. And so I said, and I warned her yesterday. And the day she did again, and I warned her again. And before I knew it, I said, my brother must have just told me to do it. And so I had him in math. And so I was one of his students, and I enjoyed math. So he knew me real well, you know. And he says, well, he said, I'll let you get by this time, but don't you ever do that again. And I says, please don't tell my mother. He says, I won't, but don't you ever do it again. I says, I won't. And I never did it. I just avoided it, but that time I was a little cocky, you know. I just thought that she was from Dresden, and I still see her. She had kind of an old face and straight hair, short, and it kind of came in like the style is now, you know. But I couldn't help it when she did it again and little again. All I could see is my brother, and I just worshipped my brother. And for a new wang, it was the tips of those two. I think she got them fixed, I'm sure, you know.
You never saw her much after that?
No, she wasn't. She somehow, they moved to, maybe they took her out of school or something. I don't know. I kept going to the same class, but she wasn't there anymore. So I don't know what happened. I didn't ask. I was tickled that that my family I never told my mother until after I was married and I was over here. When it was safe for me to tell.
What'd she say then? Anything? Or?
She said, how could you? And then she kind of smiled. But you know, same thing. There was a boy that fell into the Danube, and I jumped in and I rescued him and swam out. You know, well, I forgot all about it. It's something you do when you see something happening. Now his family, they just worshipped my mother after I came over here. They just couldn't do enough for him, and every time they always said, Frau Ebner, you know, and they always kept bringing up the fact that I saved their life. And then their boy, one of their sons was in a bank, and when the war was over, whatever money you had, you lost, except maybe 500 shillings was transferred. First, when the Germans came, the shilling what we had, we lost 1/3. That you had to give a 1.5 shillings to get 1 Reichsmark.
Okay.
Then when the war ended, then we had Reichsmarks, which were deflated, and we went back to the shillings. But they only let you keep 500 if you had that in savings or in the bank, and the rest of it you lost. And with him being in there, he let us all, each one of us, exchange, and then take another extra 500. So, so indirectly, saving that life saved saved
Some
us
money.
some money too, you know.
Okay, well, that's
But
good.
I didn't do it for that reason because at the time I didn't
Sure.
even know who the youngster was.
Mm-hmm.
I just seen somebody for Hilfe, you know, and he can't swim, and the people that were there, none of them could swim, so I just jumped in and got him out, you know.
That's amazing.
And yeah, but see, if I hadn't had swimming lessons, I wouldn't have.
Mhm.
But you know, when for a while I didn't go swimming, I was scared after I almost drowned. But when I went in college, we had to take 3 hours a week swimming, and that was a must.
Mhm.
And then we had to learn the rescue swimming,
Mm.
and you had to swim 2 hours, be swimming. You had to dive and pick up an object, and you had to rescue a person, you know, come up from behind, and you know, the best bet is to come up from behind, put your arm around their neck, hold the chin up so they didn't go on and swim, you know.
Right.
And you can't go underneath them and come because they automatically grab you and kill you. When somebody's drowning, the instinct is to do that.
Right.
Then you would die yourself.
That's why you come up behind you.
That's why you come from behind where they can't get you, see.
Mm-hmm.
And but I had to, took me a while to learn because I had to learn how to dive and jump from the big diving board that's 10 meters, that's 33 feet. Well, the first time I jumped in there, I hit the ground almost, you know, the bottom of the pool and come up because, no, the first time I brought my arms up and I had a belly flop and burned my belly, you know, I had a two-piece bathing suit on. Then the next time I went down so far because I didn't want to come up so fast again, and I come up almost on the end of the pool. See, it took me 3 times before I dived down and did it right. But I had to learn the hard way, and I think
Sure.
part of it was because I was scared, you know.
Mhm.
But then we had to do all that, and you had to get your certificate, or you wouldn't pass. But it helped me, see.
It saved a life.
It saved a life.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it seems like every time you do something, and you have to work extra hard for it, there's
Pays
reason
off.
for it, because later on somehow it proves that you,
It'll pay off later.
yeah, and so I mean it's worth the effort to go that little extra mile and do it.
Certainly was in that case.
Yes, it was, and my sister reminded me of it when she came back, and she said my younger sister was very timid, you know. So when the boys picked on her, and over there was always a habit, the boys always picked on the girls, and she said, "You always fought my battles." And when she said, I called Trouty, you know, have her come down, then they go. They leave her alone, because I just start swinging.
They were scared of you.
Yeah, they were. And yet, I think it was just because I wanted to protect her. And I think I always did. You know,
It's natural.
It's
Yeah.
natural, you know. So, but anyway, when I think back and we sometimes talk about it, like my older sister, my younger sister don't remember too much. And we talk about the war and what we did and how much, like I used to walk for milk. I had to walk 2 hours, go through a forest to get, like I'd say, 2 half-gallon bottles of milk. And every Saturday we got that. And sometimes when it was hot, you know, slush, 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 I come home and the milk was sour because it was so hot. But I had to put it in like a school, what you have your school books in, or where you have your papers, because you couldn't carry the bottles that they seen that you had bottles. Otherwise you couldn't be picked up. I went and got stuff, and I wore a gathered skirt and had pockets sewed on the inside, and I stuck the butter and the flour in those long little narrow sacks, and I was well padded. And I never sat down in a train, I always stood, you know, but it just looked like I was fat, see. And
full of
that's
food.
how I brought the food home. So I mean, there's a lot of little ways that you can do things when you're hungry, you know.
have to be, you have to improvise at times
Yes,
like
you
that.
do. You do. Then, like when the stoves are gone, you couldn't use electricity. You didn't have it. They only let you use so many kilowatts a day. And then the gas mains were all bombed, so our gas stove didn't work. And when my mother got a wood stove, then she had to pay extra for it, you know, and then she got the wood in the country. And so you had to do things. She did things that she could so beautifully, so she did that, you know. And so we learned to improvise and to make something out of nothing. I mean, you take old clothes and rip it apart, and you take a piece from here and a piece from there and make something, and you just feel like you really got something. And we were so happy over nothing. At Christmas time, we was tickled if we could just have like a roast or something, you know. And then we make those cookies and no eggs. So like I said, you use vinegar instead of eggs, and the cookies, sugar cookies, came out fine. Then we made Lebkuchen. That's kind of like a ginger snap, but it's a little different. And we do try and get some honey. You know, while you have farmers that have bees, then if you do something for them, then you get some honey, so you can do that, you know. And you always have to do something what they don't know how to do. And if you can do it, then that's how you manage. And instead of money, you take food, see? And that's how you went through the war. We had, sometimes when we were bombed, I remember we had to go, I think it was at least 20 minutes, or maybe even an hour, walk to a farmhouse to get a bucket of water. And then we had to boil it first, because there was so much typhus. See, there was dead bodies in streams, you know, and stuff. And we always had to boil everything before we could use it. And you just learn to do those things. And you learn to improvise. You couldn't get onions. It's just, sometimes when I make something, you use a lot of something. I thought, oh, gee, wouldn't it have been nice if we'd have had that during the war, because it had tasted so much better. You couldn't get simple things like elastic bands or thread or needles. Anything with elastic was out because it was rubber, you know. So we learned to improvise a lot, and instead of gathering, we just put slits on the side and put a button there, see, to hold it. But then you couldn't get buttons either. So you took all the buttons off from all the worn clothes and used them. And
reused them.
And some of them you rethreaded them so they go with what you had, see. And you made do with it. And the same thing with hats. You could take them to the store, and they put it over a form with steam, and reshape them. And you can use the same old hat and have a new shaped hat. So you see, we did everything. There was nothing thrown away.
Kind of beginning of recycling, wasn't
Yes,
it?
And I think that recycling is a good thing, because why not? I mean, all those plastic bottles that we have, if they can recycle, it'd be a good thing. You know, with the same thing with vegetables, if we could just put all that kind of stuff and put it back, because it's good fertilizer. Yeah. And with food, I mean, of course, they say in Korea, they used to get the garbage from the restaurants and fed it to the hogs, and they had toothpicks and stuff in it, and they killed hogs and punctured the stomachs or something. Yeah, so now they can't do that anymore. Somebody told me that. Maybe they were telling me a story, and just maybe I believed it because I thought it made sense, you know. But I know where we lived, there used to be a farmer that came every other day and picked up raw garbage like that from everybody in the apartment house, and took it to the farm and fed his hogs with it.
Yeah, well, it was being put to use then.
Yes, it was.
Of course, you do that on farms here now anyway. They
Yeah.
always used to take potato peelings and things out to the hogs.
Well, see, they used to feed the hogs all potatoes. I know they had like a S-shaped metal piece that was sharp and a handle on it. You know, like an ice pick, but it was shaped like an ace. So they cooked the potatoes, and then they came along with that, and they chopped it all out. And then they put buttermilk or some milk with it, and that's what they fed the hogs. We didn't hear of corn. The only corn we heard of what they call cucaroots, and they made polenta out of it, see. And that's what you ate, see. But the corn was grown in Bulgaria and those southeastern country. and it was imported. But then after the Americans came, you see, they started corn, and they grow corn over there too.
In Austria now?
Uh-huh. But it doesn't grow as big as here. But nothing grows as big as in America. My family always said, well, here comes the American. Big machineries, and just one whoosh, one swallow, and it's all done, you know. And that's complimentary, you know. They just said that they used to buy stuff that was made in America because they knew it was made well. Now, she said, my sister, both of them say, you can't buy stuff made in America because it's all made Japan, China, Korea, or someplace. And they just will not buy it because it's not made as good as the American. And that really hurts.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they always looked on America of being big, powerful, but they also knew they could count on America for help if they needed it. And like they say with machinery, you know, one whoosh and it's done. But they got the little bitty machine, it takes forever to do something. And when that goes away, it kind of hurts because, you see, them having a sister over here, they feel partial.
Sure.
Because when you have loved ones, you're concerned about the country where they live. And when you think of how many loved ones are over here, there has to be a bridge between them. When you go on an airplane, like when we've gone home and we try to get those flights where you can go pretty cheap, that whole plane is full of either Germans or Austrians, mostly Germans. They were war brides.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they go home, you know, or the parents, the grandparents come over to see the grandchildren, and they fly from Germany, and they don't speak English, they just speak German, and there's just every time we fly over there, it's mostly people that come over here to see their family that somebody came. It is, and it kind of gives you a warm feeling because, you know, well, when you have that close a relationship, there's never going to be a war again. I don't think that family would fight family, but maybe they would. I don't know.
Of course, back in, well, even in World War I,
Yeah.
a lot of German Americans, either they were born in Germany or their parents were, and yet we still had
the
a
war.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's much guarantee against war. or
Maybe
not.
maybe it isn't, but when you think it has multiplied so much.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right.
You know, when you think, I mean, here's me, and I have my family and their cousins and nieces and nephew and all them, then they know somebody else that came over here. And maybe they're related to some powerful person, you know, maybe a politician or something. And
it's quite an ordeal for you.
it is, because you see the country was taken over and invaded when you think of it. Now see, when Hitler came, it was altogether different. Like I said, I was 10 years old, not quite 10 years old. It was in March of 38, and I would have been 10 years in April, you know. But the feeling that you have, it's hard to describe because you don't quite understand it. When you look out the window and you see one of those big airplanes coming, you duck, you know. You're still, some of you bringing up, it's in it, that even that couldn't be changed. You don't go with the flow, really, unless people was hoping that he was still alive, and they were still thinking he was alive when Berlin, when it fell. And that they saying, oh, Hitler somewhere. One time they said he's living in the bottom of one of those factory chimneys, you know, they're way big on the bottom, but he's hiding in there. Some of them said he was in South America. And some of them said that, you know, he had a U-boat and was in Germany, or if it was close by.
Or Buchenwald, or
Buchenwald. No, not Buchenwald.
Auschwitz?
No, Auschwitz was in Poland.
In Poland?
Yeah.
Was your brother an officer?
Yes.
What was his rank?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant. Well, I can see why your husband was so smitten with you.
Oh, I don't know.